All right, we are live here on Facebook. I am Ron Sneller here with a good friend of mine, Brandon Perry. Brandon is a entrepreneur, a financial coach. He's a leader in his community, and more importantly, probably most importantly, he's a great Christian man, a good husband, and a father of I lose count, Brandon. 87 children. What? You
Uh,
got three and number four on the way to be here soon.
yeah, if I get to 87, just please give me a kick.
Happy Father's Day, man. Happy Father's Day.
Yeah, happy Father's Day to you as well.
Thanks, brother. Thank you. Now, you and I go back a long way. We're Kersley High School, Flint, Kersley. So two boys from Flint making good in the world. How about that?
Yeah, not bad. Class of 98, right?
You got it, man. You got it. Brandon was a hooligan in high school. I didn't hang out with him too much, except for in Spanish class. He always got me in trouble. So
Listen.
was that Miss Hollinger's class?
Yeah, Spanish. So
Yeah.
I remember you when you were a skinny guy.
Yeah. Back before I found the muscle shakes and the weights.
Yeah, I think you were the smallest of the boys in your family, weren't you?
I still am, but now we're all just, we're pushing 40 and we're just big and fat now. So you are 40 now, right?
I am, man. I'll be 41 in October. So it feels good. You're a little slower. Your energy's not as high.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I still feel like I got, another 40, 50 years in me of productive life.
That's wonderful, man. That's wonderful. The good Lord has a plan for you, and you're making good on the way that you help people and coach them and through education. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit. So a big part of what you do is you are a financial coach. That's a big part of your business, but it's a little different than what I do, because in my business, we give advice and we, sell products, but you don't sell like insurance or investments or anything like that. You do things a little bit differently. And I know that kind of goes back into like your past history, just your family growing up, like what you saw, and
Sure.
I guess maybe some of the bad examples or, bad advice that you kind of had to overcome and reprogram yourself. So can you talk first of all, like a little bit about like your passion for what you do in that arena, and just a little bit about your past and how you got to where you're at right now?
Okay, sure. Well, as far as bad advice, I don't think I ever really got bad advice. I didn't get any advice. I watched my parents' example, and they were living a normal, we grew up in a General Motors world. And so you always had income coming in. I think banks were privy to that, so to speak. And I always kind of joke. I remember my parents had payments on I remember getting a swimming pool. And so we had payments on a swimming pool for, I think, over a decade. I'm not sure how long it really was, but I know when I speak now, I always kind of laugh, like looking on that now, like realistically in Michigan, how long is your swimming pool open?
Yeah.
From June to August. So for 3 months of swim time, but you're going to make payments on a pool for 12 months. And so, that was just the kind of financial upbringing, and I don't think my parents ever really got on the same page, financially. And so without having an education, it compounded when it got to me, so I didn't know how to balance a checkbook, or that you were supposed to. Credit cards were easy when you and I were in our early 20s, and I think they're even easier now. And when you learn to swipe, it's like I like clothes, I like eating out. And, I think by the time I was 25, I had about 5 or 6 credit cards maxed out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did the same thing, I think, in probably my early 20s and coming out of college. I don't know how I even got credit cards. And back then I got credit cards with pretty high limits. And I think maybe what happened is the companies sent them to my house for my dad based on his information, because I wasn't really making any money, but I filled it out and sent it in. I remember, like 19, 20 years old, I had a credit card of like, over $10,000 limit. I think it was crazy.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's crazy. So that was kind of your start. So, I mean, did you have some kind of epiphany? I mean, I know you're really big into education and who you associate with. Like, how were you able to kind of turn it around and get things heading in the right direction?
Well, I know a lot of financially free people, and they had kind of been teaching snippets, over the years. And, I think the peak of my financial disaster, because when you're hurting financially, it hurts. I remember a time I couldn't pay a cell phone bill, and this was 07, 08. And the lady called me, and I remember it sunk me, and I needed to have my cell phone because I was self-employed and I needed work. And she's like, well, can you have one of your kids pay the cell phone bill? I'm like, I was like 28, I'm like, well, first of all, I don't have kids. Second of all, if I did, they wouldn't be old enough to pay my bills. And it's just, I was like, something's got to change, man. And I did. And I just kind of went in a financial education, so to speak, to leave that mess behind, because it ain't fun. And I don't think there's anything more stressful than bad finances.
Yeah. And I'll speak to that. I mentioned having the credit cards and things like that, but I don't think there was ever really a point in my life where I was really bad. Right. However, I'll say, and I've told you this privately, and I'll say it on this webinar, but your influence in my life has made a huge difference. 10 years ago, I was a teacher making $40,000 a year, if that, living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And I decided that, I needed to make a change. So I ended up going into business and started making really good money for the first time in my life. But at that exact same time, you and I kind of rekindled our friendship, and you introduced me to a lot of great materials for just business and motivation, and especially from the financial standpoint. And I'll never forget, just associating with you and going to conferences and, reading the books and listening to the audios. It was this epiphany that dawned on me, like how to build my financial life and the foundation and not, waste money. Cause it was like really the first time in my life that I had money. Like, growing up, my parents were successful. They both worked for GM, and my mom was superintendent. Like, we never struggled for anything. But as I got out on my own through my 20s, I never made any money, and I really had to, you know what I mean? I really had to not do a lot of fun stuff. I really had to watch my spending. But when I first started making money, I mean, that's like a lot of people, they'll just go blow it on all sorts of stuff. And thankfully I didn't do that. I saved and I invested much of that had to do with your influence in my life and the materials that you introduced me to. So thank you, cause here's 10 years later, and I've got insurance and investments and rental properties. And we just bought our dream house recently. And, a lot of that foundation has been hard work over the last 8 or 10 years, but that's the kind of power that you bring to people to help them. And sometimes it's helping people dig out of a financial mess. Sometimes it's just helping people start from ground zero, like when they finally have a good job or they're finally making money, like how to start making good moves with their lives. So can you talk a little bit about, that's my personal experience, but can you talk a little bit about, without mentioning names, of course, like people you've helped and some of the problems that you see, guys in their 30s and 40s, like you and I, who are in struggles financially, and what are some of the mistakes that they make?
Okay, well, let me go here real quick and just edify what I was just talking to somebody the other day. I remember that conversation, quite vividly, because it was just really cool. I mean, we were reconnecting. We sat down at Tim Hortons, and I think that may have started your coffee addiction.
Yeah.
And both of us, I think, were single at that time. Neither one of us were married, and both of us were looking for changes. And I've been kind of on Avenue for a little bit. And I remember you had a little notebook, and you started writing down some goals, and you were seeking a wife and a family, and you were going to buy a house. You were going to do all these things, and you've accomplished all those. I mean, you're a husband now. You got 2 beautiful daughters, and like you said, your financial life has turned around completely. You guys just bought. I mean, I drove up your driveway a couple weeks ago. I mean, you guys got a beautiful home, and your last home was nice. And so those are some of those success stories, and that was just a small moment in our lives. And we've carried good conversations since. And I'm going to use your brother, Jordan, as an example. I don't know if he's listening, but him and Jonah are a great example. Jordan came into our company for a short period of time, and he really loved that financial material. And he recently became self-employed, and the company Jordan has is a refrigeration style company. He works on a lot of restaurants. And so when this whole coronavirus thing hit, I was thinking of him. I mean, that was he told me what he paid for this company. I was like, dang, dude, that's a big fee. But because of the education that he received, he had told me he had paid half of the cost of the company up front. and he had reserves in the bank. He never gave himself a raise because he wanted to see how the business worked first, just to make sure he didn't go under financially. And so even though restaurants weren't open, your brother wasn't stressed out at all when I had this conversation. He was pumped, for his future. But that was because he had a good solid base. And there's some of the mistakes I see people make. They get money in their hands. One, they blow it, or if they become self-employed, instead of taking a year or two to make sure they figure out the business. Robert Kiyosaki talks about it here in the first 5 years. It's like 70% of businesses go out. And a big reason is their lack of financial thinking. And that's even in employee. I see so many people live way above their means. We were having a conversation. I know somebody who they were struggling, and they probably make somewhere between 50 and 70,000 a year. Yeah, they got an Escalade and some other big fancy Cadillac. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and nothing wrong with those cars. I mean, I'm looking at a Cadillac, but when it comes to smart, sound financial decisions, if you're not in the income range to afford it, don't buy it. Because that was the thing I had to learn, as a young man, I cared what other people think. Well, at the end of the day, those people don't pay your bills. And so who cares what they think? Because if you go broke, you look stupid, and so those are some, we care too much about what other people think about if we look successful or not. And a lot of times we're hurting, but we're faking it on Facebook or faking it to our family. And it's not that, to me, that's one of the biggest mistakes. We care too much what others think.
You know what? I see that so much in my line of work, and people who, I guess, keep up with the Joneses. They do a lot of things for appearances. And then on Facebook, you see the flashy vacations and the vehicles and the house or whatever it might be, like whatever their thing is. And again, like you said, like none of that is bad in and of itself. But then when you talk to them, it's like, well, I can't save for retirement. I can't buy life insurance. I can't do this or this because we have no money. Like we're in debt. Like we have all this stuff, but we're drowning. And so, like you said, a lot of it's a facade. It's fake. And I feel bad for those people. I mean, you got to take some personal responsibility. But that's a big part of what we do, especially you, is helping to coach people like out of that and teach them sound financial principles.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, I can name, gosh, I got so many testimonies. A good friend of mine, I just moved to Grand Blanc, and a good buddy of mine lives down the road, and the changes him and his wife have gone through in the last, 5 years, I want to say in the first month of them going through some of our information, they eliminated, I want to say $400 or $500 out of their budget, but within the next couple of months, it was up to like $1,500 a month of wasted, just small nitpicky things that they were able to eliminate out of their budget. I mean, $1,500 a month, like, like what that can do in somebody's life as far as saving for a retirement or a rainy day fund or whatever. I mean, and that was money being blown on stupid stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people get into habits, and I think, like, if you want to use the analogy of a boat, like the little cracks appear in the floor of the boat, but that goes on for a few years, and before you know it, you have a gaping hole and water's pouring into the boat, and pretty soon the boat is sinking.
Right.
$1,500. I mean, that's a mortgage payment. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a lot of money every month, like on like wasteful type stuff. Yeah. Right.
It's funny. You make a good point. I heard a quote years ago. The guy was like, how do you become a millionaire, is the term he used. Gradually, then suddenly. But how do you go broke? Gradually, then suddenly, right? Yeah. Small cracks that, I mean, when somebody goes broke and they go belly up bankrupt, that didn't happen overnight. That was years of bad thinking and bad principles applied to their financial situation. But the same works in the opposite direction, right? It's not your future isn't going to change overnight. It's steps over time that lead to a successful outcome. I mean, that cup of coffee we had was probably 7-8 years ago, and you bought your dream home,
Yeah. Yeah.
But 7 or 8 years went by just like that.
It did. And it takes time to build up. And I think that's the next question I guess I want to ask you, like, as a financial coach, what are some of the things that you do to help encourage people? Because I think that the reason why people don't learn about finances, and why so many people, like they try to get out of debt, or they try to build a rainy day fund, or they try to save for retirement. And the reason why that happens for like 2 or 3 months and then they fall away is
Mhm.
because it's hard. It's not easy to change those habits. Like it's difficult and it's a little bit painful. And you mentioned earlier, Robert Kiyosaki, and one of the things that he is all about is long-term gratification. And so it's hard to
Yeah.
focus on that long-term gratification. So what are some of the things that you do to help encourage people and try to keep them on the path?
Sure. Well, one, I tell people you need to go on a no media diet for a short period of time. If you need to ditch the Facebook and ditch the television for a minute, do it, because, your subconscious brain, when you start learning the power of, I'll call it brainwashing, because it's out there, both good and bad, right?
Well, it's called television program for a reason, right? They program you. Yeah.
But I mean, it's those commercials that sink in your brain that cause you to go out and make a lot of times dumb decisions. And so sometimes you have to turn off the outside world. And then the other thing is you do have to have a long-term goal, but the long-term goals are hard, right? Because by nature, we're instant, right? We want instant gratification. It's just the nature of our hearts. So you need to have short-term rewards, right? So maybe it's okay, I get a certain amount in, my emergency savings, and we'll go to a movie, or something small, right? Don't make it astronomical, but give yourself short-term rewards. But also have a light at the end of the road, like I'm a big believer in the dream board, I know the stuff that we want. When we just took a dream vacation not too long ago, but that was because of a vision board or a dream board of the long-term goals that you have. And I recommend just obviously always stay on top of it. So, I mean, I got some of my notebooks out right now, like, I got my 2020 financial goals here. And that's something I look at on a regular basis, right? And because it checks me to make sure that I'm not getting stagnant, but then I'm keeping focused on what I'm looking to accomplish this year financially.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I think another really key point is, we've talked about vehicles and homes and vacation and things like that. However, what we haven't talked about, and I know that you and I both plan for this and write it down, we both have goals to give to charity, churches,
Yeah.
and causes that we believe in. I know that you're really large right now into like the pro-life, anti-abortion movement. Also
Yeah.
with what's going on with like the child sex trafficking. I know that
Yep.
you throw dinners, you go to those dinners, you give your money to support those causes. So it's not
Yep.
just all about material things. That's not what we're trying to say at all. Because that's, again, one of the things that I learned in, and I kind of already knew it, but to see it written in the materials that you promote, to hear it talked about on the audios, is that money is stewardship and it's a gift from God. And we need to take part of that and give back to the church and the causes that we believe in and to support our community. And I know that you are really big into that as well. So can you just speak to some of the things that are on your heart as part of your
Sure.
financial and life goals in that regard?
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually have a list of charities I got goals for how much I actually want to give to them.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of my favorite authors, and I guess he's a minister in a sense, Ken Ham. I went to a private dinner with him, and because, we give it to that charity. And he said it like this: there needs to be more Christian entrepreneurs who get ticked off about a cause that will build businesses that are financially sound enough to support ministries that we hold dear to our heart. And a big one for my wife and I is, we're pro-life and in protecting children and even these mothers. And so there's one ministry that, we don't give a lot to this one yet. We use another pro-life one, but we have goals for this one. And Bill Lewis and I, we know the number that ministry needs to fund for a year that this pastor has. And so now we're like, okay, how do we get our business goals lined up so that we can fuel money to that, to support it, because long after, I'm gone, I would rather that money keep going to kingdom causes, and whatnot. So yeah, no, that's a big one. Child sex trafficking is another one. Had an opportunity here at this company called, or organization, Operation Underground Railroad. You don't really realize how bad the world is until you start seeing people work in these particular ministries. And I would love nothing more than to give as much money as I can, but I got to make money to do that, because my kids want to eat too. They tend to like a roof over their head. I mean, they're freeloaders. I got a stewardship right there, man.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think God works that way. We're all called in different. When I sat down with the one guy who actually sits across the table from the person selling these children to negotiate deals, I couldn't do that man's job. I'm too aggressive. I would literally reach across that guy. I would kill him, and I would ruin the entire operation.
Yeah.
But I am good at entrepreneurship to where I can make money to help fund that guy for what he's getting. I think that's the bigger picture of how God works. He uses all of us as different parts of an overall stewardship. And I believe the financial one is very important.
Well, I think that a lot of, unfortunately, I think a lot of Christians have an unhealthy view of money. I know there's a lot of people who feel like if they make a lot of money or if they have a lot of money, it means that they're a bad person. There's just like this shame or this guilt, and I'm not exactly sure where it comes from. So it almost seems like in a way, like it kills people's ambitions because they think, well, if I make $70,000 a year, that's okay. But if I were to like, really push it or build a business and get up to 100,000, like that's too much. And I shouldn't make that much. But like my key thing is at the end of the day, the bottom line is that money equals power and money equals influence. And it's like, who do we want to have that money and power and influence? Bad people or good Christians, right? Just because you earn money or you save money, that doesn't mean that you're bad, right? Like right. It's not that people get the phrase wrong so much that money is the root of all evil. It's not money being the root of all evil. It's the love of money, the distorted love of money. That is the root of all evil. But if we are making money for our financial future and to take care of our family and to give back to these good causes, that's a good thing, right?
Heck yeah. In fact, I got a $100 bill here, and I'm gonna put it on the table. If it jumps up and attacks me, I'll let you know, and then therefore money is truly evil. But that $100 bill isn't going to do nothing. I'm the one that controls what that $100 bill does. And so it's as a Christian, a believer, it's my heart issue. And so if you never get the heart right, it doesn't matter if you make $50,000 a year or $50 million a year. Your heart is wrong, and it's going to do wrong. You can do just as much harm with $50,000 a year. How many people do you know $50,000 a year spend all their time at strip clubs? That's a hard issue. But you can do good with money as well. And that's one verse, and I think we tend to focus too much on it. There's a proverb in there about dishonest weights and measures. Well, what are you seeing with the financial reserves? Fractional reserve banking, that's dishonest weights and measures, right? The Lord detests that. But because we only pay attention to the root, or what we're paraphrasing as the root, we're not paying attention to all that God taught about money. And he can use money for good. I mean, the charities that you and I have seen, I'm watching people like the one ministry I was talking about, 200 plus babies saved in like the last 3 years, but it takes money to fuel that. I would say that's that money did a good thing there, but it came from a good heart.
Absolutely. I'll bring up Robert Kiyosaki again. Robert Kiyosaki likes to take that phrase and twist it. And he says, the love of money is not the root of all evil. The lack of money is the root of all evil. And you think about the disproportionate crime rates in impoverished communities, or even just families that are struggling with debt, and how that leads maybe to alcoholism and failed marriages. And, they say the number one cause of divorce is finances. So let's transition a little bit here, because living within your means is one thing. But I mean, if you are like, look, in this country, if a family's living on, let's say $50,000 a year, I mean, they're not rich. I mean, even $75,000 a year, that's not rich. So one of the things that you help people to do through building a business with you is to help expand their means and to bring in more income. And for some people, that might mean an extra $500 a month. And to them, that's the world. But some people build the business full time, like you, and make six-figure incomes. It could do a lot of great things with your money. So tell us a little bit about that, like your business with Life, and like how you help people to kind of expand their means.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, that starts with the dream. I think a lot of reasons that people are in debt is we do have dreams. We live in the freest country in the world, right? And I believe we were built on the back of entrepreneurs, right? People who had dreams of a better future. They wanted to achieve all that God has put in them to achieve. I don't want to live and die and not see the world, or even, with the vacation we went on back in November, that was a 3-week vacation in Florida, in Myrtle Beach, that we were able to spend with our kids.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, that's a dream, right? And you have to have the financial means to do so. And that's a big part of it. So, what is the true standard of living that you need to be able to achieve what you want to achieve, right? And that goes back to it's not greedy to want to do that. To me, it's more greedy if you're financing all that versus, building a business, or, you're very successful in what you do. I've watched many people just come through our leadership education. I've got a friend, she's in her mid-40s, and she just recently it was a 70% raise at what she does.
Wow.
Because of, that leadership education. But we also have a very unique business model, through what we call the Life Super App now, where the basis of what we do is still teach the leadership and financial information. Oren and Chris have always built a foundation of that's how you successfully build a life. When you have the right leadership principles, you can do whatever you want. But even the financial principles, like when they became multimillionaires, they didn't want to blow it, right? They didn't want to be the go rich, go broke type of people. And that's what led ultimately to our financial material. So there is an avenue there. And obviously we're leveraging, to me, one of the neatest sectors of society, and that's technology. Through the Super App, where obviously all of our leadership education is in there. But the ability to save up, with the trip credits and stuff, like you're kind of, without thinking about it, you're saving up for a nice vacation later. And then the cash back portion. So whatever money you are spending, at least you're getting some of that back. The way I teach it in Michigan is, the average cash back on a purchase is like 5.4%. The sales tax here is 6%. So you're at least getting that back.
Yeah. Yeah. You showed me how to use the app the other day. We were at Panera, and it was awesome. So I signed up for it a month or two ago. I really haven't used it much yet. I like the fact that the audios are on there. That's awesome. But the cool thing about your business, and it's went through some evolution. And so when it first started, like when I first became like involved with it, LIFE stood for an acronym: Living Intentionally for Excellence. And I was at a point in my life, as I mentioned, that I was making some transitions, and I just felt like I was made for more than what I was currently doing. And I was looking, and so that like really just rang true with me. And I started to realize, because I wasn't around the language of success, so to speak. I didn't really have anybody in my life who was doing that. And so again, that just the powerful association. And I realized, like, hey, if I'm ever going to get what I want out of life, like, I need to take the bull by the horns. I need to write it down. I need to have goals. I need to plan, and then I need to execute on that. And, you were, like I said, a huge part of like helping me to do that. And then another thing that they had, and this is just going back to something you said a minute ago, just to clarify for some of our viewers, is what attracted me to the other thing that attracted me to life, like with what Oren and Chris were doing, is, there was a huge focus on what they called the 8 F's. And that was faith and family and finances and friends and freedom fun. There was all these things, but it was about being a well-rounded person. So the material that they put out was like overall leadership, but there were audios and books about how to have a good marriage, how to structure your financial life. A lot of what you guys also promote has to do with like faith-based Christian materials. So it was like all encompassing into becoming that good, well-rounded man that I was striving to be. So, that's just something that really resonated with me. And now you guys are evolving into, and this is kind of what I want to really dive into, like the last 10 minutes. Again, you continue to evolve your business model and grow and get better. And you posted something the other day on Facebook where you talked about some of the jobs that are going to be like, that are really susceptible to automation. And obviously you guys are building a business that is leveraging technology. It's automation proof. It's even shutdown proof, really. Because you guys were able to just continue operating, doing what you do, leveraging technology. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I know what I do is like kind of halfway up the automation list. Thankfully, I think we have some tricks up our sleeve that it won't affect us as bad, hopefully. But talk a little bit about, about the automation, the threats to that, and what you guys do building your business to prevent that.
Sure. Well, let me go a couple different routes.
Sorry, I know I talked a lot and gave you a lot of things to unpack, but now I just want to turn it over to you pretty much like the last 10 minutes.
So, one, the world is changing. So we graduated in 98. We graduated, home computers were really starting to become a thing and actually having internet. Remember, you had a phone cord going from your computer to the wall, so things have changed a lot in 22 years. We're getting old, buddy.
Yeah.
And sometimes technology takes a while to catch up. And I think what we're seeing, in fact, I read this book a couple years ago called Humans Are Underrated. And by Jeff Colvin, bestseller of Talent is Overrated. But in that book, he talked about what is changing. And so when you look at things like, we grew up in a General Motors world, manufacturing was this huge boom. Mm-hmm. But you're looking at, and that's what he's talking here, those type of jobs, and no offense to anybody who works those jobs. I grew up, my whole family worked for General Motors. But, Henry Ford said it himself, right? I'm not hiring guys to think. I'm just hiring guys to just come in and do a task. And when the information age, you're now able to, in a sense, create machines or robots that'll do that portion. And what it'll allow, you and I were created, we're just talking about being Christians. God gave us this, the most powerful tool in the world is your brain. And that information age will allow us to be entrepreneurs who think ahead of innovation and create the new innovation. So you're going to see, I don't think you'll see all these manufacturing jobs at some point, right? There'll be different industries. Mm-hmm. And so you'll go through a transition where you'll see a lot of these jobs leave, but different industries will come in. And that's kind of where I was going, I was at a conference this weekend. That's what he was going with, so much has changed. And the coronavirus, I think, in a sense, maybe sped it up. And I even think my industry, Bill and I have had a lot of great conversations, Zoom, you and I are having this conversation over Zoom, where there was a time we wouldn't have done this, but this is information age conversation. And it just changes the way you do business. And there'll be sectors of jobs that are still available. I don't think all those, you see just a certain percentage, because you're still going to need a human behind a lot of that doing some of the legwork. But the mass amount of it will be gone. And so what's neat about our company, when you look at another book called Matchmaker, where it talks about these apps, think about Uber. Uber is an app that connects two parties. But think about this. I heard a speaker saying one time, he's got a Tesla, and he goes, man, can you imagine the day if I had an app on my phone? It's like I'm sitting here at work, my Tesla's just sitting there collecting dust. So what if I was able to rent out my Tesla, right? It's a self-driving car, to go and work for me while I'm at work making an extra income stream.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So those are the things that kind of think. And then when you look at apps, especially a super app, Forbes magazine or Forbes.com did a really good article on that, and the idea of being able to pay with your app, like somebody sent me an Apple gift card, and it's funny. We went out to eat, and they don't take an Apple gift card. Apple and Apple Pay and Google Pay still have a very small percentage of the market, versus our app just creates gift cards for these different merchants, and you can use them almost everywhere. But you're going to see a lot, and there's going to come here's my wallet now. There's going to come a time, I really believe, where I don't even have this thing anymore. That the things I need to make purchases will be on my phone. And I even like the fact, it's funny, I just finally got rid of my DVD player, Ron. I feel like an old fart, right? Because who has DVDs anymore?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
You and I both also have Yahoo email addresses. Somebody was calling me out on that the other day. I said, I do have a Gmail, but I don't use it. I use my Yahoo.
So,
we're old.
Yeah. I remember when I used to listen to motivational tapes, driving back and forth to work. Mm-hmm. But now all that's right there on my phone. I can sit outside in the backyard. I watch the kids play, and I'll pull up an educational audio or a sermon or something like that, mm-hmm. and listen to it wherever I go. I could be in the car or whatever else. So I can have education. The tools that are available to you on your smartphone, let me just say this. Hopefully you're using your smartphone to educate you versus to dumbify you, which I fear that too many people are doing that. But you can.
Can I kind of butt in real quick with that?
Yes.
Again, one of the key things with Brandon's company is when I got involved and we reconnected 7-8 years ago, that was the thing that I loved. It was all about, because I've always loved to read, but it was like, hey, dummy, don't just read like James Patterson and Stephen King. Why don't you read books about like business and finances and how to improve yourself? Why don't you actually take the time to use your cell phone and listen to an audio, like as you're driving around, instead of just listening to political radio or sports talk radio, which I used to do, but that's pointless. Why not listen to something that's going to like fill your brain with motivation and knowledge so you can improve where you're at in life? Right. So that's a key.
Yep. And here's what's neat. So when we were just strictly that, we grew fast as a company, and but we still had a very limited market because a lot of people don't realize the thinking change that they actually need. Mm-hmm. However, with the super app, we're growing faster, and we plug that stuff in because now that they're using one portion of the app, they'll get to this other portion and learn the leadership. They'll learn the financial stuff as well. In fact, here's something really cool. Being from Flint, we all just seen Chris Swanson, and some of his materials actually on that phone. But that was him. He went through a leadership and personal development journey that allowed him to be prepared for that moment that we just saw him in.
So that was awesome. What just happened in Genesee County with Chris Swanson. But for those people watching who are not aware, you said that like the materials that he has are on the phone. Or on the app, what materials do you mean?
Okay. So one, our financial fitness program is on there. That's something I paid $150 for, but just for, our super app, it's a $30 subscription. Mm-hmm. But to get that $30 back in what's called trip credit. So you get to use that $30 later towards a resort or towards a hotel room. Mm-hmm. But you'll have the financial fitness in there. And so a big part of that obviously is the, getting out of debt. And building up an emergency fund, which we were talking about earlier. But then the second portion is how to make more money, and digging in that personal development, building a business or whatever. But then my favorite part is the big picture, right? What's really going on with money?
Yeah.
But on the personal leadership development side, we have all these marriage talks. We have case studies, parenting talks for your kids. Some of the stuff that Swanson covers for your teenagers, some of the professional athletes that we've had on there it's a great overall education tool for those AFs that you were mentioning earlier.
Now, Chris Swanson has been a guest speaker at some of your conferences, right? I think I remember seeing pictures of him.
Yeah, he's actually he's the spokesperson for our AGO Foundation, All Grace Outreach. So, man. But yeah, he speaks for us quite a bit. He does some very, very, very good stuff.
That's tremendous. Well, listen, let's wrap this up in the next 2 or 3 minutes. And I just kind of hit you with some like rapid fire questions. Give me 2 books, your personal favorite, and then one book that you think, in addition to that, one book you think that everybody needs to read.
Oh boy, that's a loaded question.
I know it is, because you've introduced me to a lot of great stuff. So I guess if you had to pick like one favorite that's helped you out the most, and then maybe like one book coming up that you haven't read yet, but you think everybody needs to, maybe that's on your list.
That I haven't read yet. I got a whole stack right here.
I do too.
Yeah. So, I'm a believer in financial fitness, obviously, just because I think money is a game changer, and having the correct view of money. And so I highly recommend that. One I'm looking forward to reading soon. I actually haven't ordered it yet. It's on my Amazon cart. But it's by Tim Ballard, who's behind Operation Underground Railroad.
Okay.
And he talks about modern day slavery, slave stealers, true accounts of slave rescues then and now. And he goes into the human trafficking industry and how brutal it is.
Yeah.
And so, I'm looking forward to reading that just to, I want to be more awake about what's going on and what I could do to make a difference in that arena.
Awesome, man. Awesome. In closing, do you have any just brief final words of wisdom for anybody who's watching this? Just kind of a general.
Brief final words of wisdom.
I know we've covered a lot, man, but just any like last thing that you might just want to say.
You know what? Here, I was playing baseball with my boy the other day, and I was trying to teach him the value of patience. And I really believe that God has called us to do a good work, and the work that we do brings glory to Him. So when we take our time to do a good work, it brings glory to our Father. So as a believer, so whatever you do, and from your finances to your marriage, and just to the legacy that you're going to leave, we're all going to leave some sort of legacy, good, bad, or indifferent. But my best word of advice would be to do that good work that leaves all glory to God, and also leaves. I don't want to leave here unfinished. When I get to heaven, I want to know that I completed everything God has called me to do.
That's amazing, man. Great advice. Great advice. Brandon, where can people find you and more information about your business with Life and the Super App?
Well, obviously, I'm easily found on Facebook, Brandon Perry. And then from there, you can get a hold of me about the Life Super App. It is one of those apps where you actually have to know somebody to use it.
Okay. And then is there any kind of like website or a link, or maybe even once we stop live streaming, you can go and make the first comment on this video where people can learn a little bit more?
Yeah. Let me look it up, actually. I'm getting old, man.
It's hard to remember stuff.
Yeah. BrandonPerry.lifeinfoapp.com.
So BrandonPerry.lifeinfoapp.com. Awesome.
That's it.
Awesome. Brandon, this has been a great time catching up, and we'll do this again because I know there's like other topics that we wanted to probably dive a little bit more into.
I had notes about other stuff.
I know it. So we'll do this again, maybe in a month or something like that. We can maybe dive into more detail on some of this other stuff. Cause I know we want to talk a little bit more about like business ownership and, taxes, and just, there's all sorts of great things that you and I can discuss. And we'll have to do this regularly. So I had a great time. Awesome.
My pleasure, man.
Have a great Father's Day weekend, dude.
All right. Same to you, brother.